Hello, everyone, and welcome to the show. And thank you so much for being here today. Have I got a treat for you? You know, one of the things I love is I love being able to connect meaning making, personal growth, spiritual development with real practical ways that we live in our lives, with the material experience that we have. And so today we have an incredibly insightful, transformative episode for you, especially if you have been living with financial beliefs and financial messages in your subconscious mind that have been limiting forces for you. Money is often a topic that people don't want to talk about. You know, it's like one of those forbidden subjects, but it's such a vital part of our lives. And really, being in a good relationship with money makes us feel powerful to affect change in our lives, to make decisions in our lives. And how we manage our finances can profoundly impact our sense of self-worth, our sense of enoughness, our sense of security, freedom, and overall well-being. That's why I am thrilled to welcome our guest today, Michelle Arpin Begina. Michelle is a renowned financial literacy advocate. She's a seasoned financial planner, wealth manager. She's a certified financial planner, certified investment management analyst, and she's the author of a new book, Be Good with Money, which we're going to talk about in depth today. Michelle knows firsthand the influence of living with money beliefs that we've inherited and absorbed over time. She understands the emotional toll that can follow in the wake of a challenging relationship with money. And she also knows how to overcome those patterns, how to move through those beliefs, and how to really be good with money and change our money story. She is a walking, living example of that and such an inspiration for us. So today's episode, we're going to deep dive into the essentials of financial literacy. We'll talk about your money beliefs and how they are influencing you. Michelle's going to give us really practical tips on how to be good with money, strategies for making decisions when it comes to our retirement or paying off debt or saving, investing. And we'll also explore the concept of financial freedom, what it means for you and how you can achieve it no matter where you are on your financial journey. So whether you're looking to gain a better understanding of your finances, seeking advice on how to make your money work for you, or if you're just simply interested in becoming more financially empowered, this episode is for you. You want to stay tuned till the end because the call to action that Michelle leaves us with was a profound game changer for me. And you'll hear it at the end of the episode. So make sure you listen to the whole thing. And just on a personal level, I've known Michelle for years, and she has been such an inspiration for me in my own money journey, or moneyhood, as we'll talk about. And reading her book and knowing her and having conversations over the years as she's been developing this work has really helped me to up-level my own relationship with money and help me to be open to receive more abundance from the various sources in my life. So I'm thrilled to welcome her to the show. So join me in welcoming Michelle. Michelle, welcome to the show, and thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to have you.
I am truly honored to be here with you, Rachel.
Good. Well, I have to start by saying I absolutely love your book.
Thank you.
Be Good with Money. I had so many aha moments and so many insights and memories of my childhood and things that were coming so clear to me as I was reading this book. And I really love the way that you start the book with your story, and the way that your story really informed so much of your life's work and your purpose, and even, all of the wisdom that you put into this book. So I was wondering if you would mind just start with telling us your story and how you came into this work.
I am happy to do that, but I'm insanely curious to know what your aha moments are as well.
Yeah. I will reveal all those aha moments.
Awesome. I can't wait to hear them.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I tell a story right out of the gate with the book that was, bar none, the hardest story of my life to ever tell. In fact, I never, ever intended to do so. And it was working with a coach who literally asked me, what is the one story you've never told anyone?
Mm-hmm.
And my internal response was, well, I know what that story is, and I'm not telling you or anyone else for that matter. And I ended up shortly after being asked that question to take a speaking course refresher. And as soon as I signed up for that course, I heard a little voice that simply said, it's time to tell your story.
Wow.
And that little voice repeated that for days, multiple times a day, until I finally sat down and acknowledged the voice and kind of looked up and said, okay, if I get a chance to tell my story, I will tell it. And as soon as I acknowledged it and said that, I also wrote down a few sentences as an opener for the story. And then the voice got quiet. And the story that I told, which is the first story that I tell in the book, is after growing up hearing your college material, you'll be the first in the family to go to school, we'll support you. I then learned as a 17-year-old newly graduated from high school, standing on a dock of a marina to see my parents' brand new yacht for the first time, that my parents had blown my college fund to buy that boat.
Mm. Mm.
And I have done a lot of work and a lot of thinking and a lot of self-analysis around this. And what I did in that moment, I actually didn't react when my father said that to me. I stood and I stared at him in the eyes, and my brain went into overdrive. College costs a lot of money. How am I going to get money? If you're going to get a job, right? Where are you going to work? And I literally turned off the dock and walked back to my car and got in my car and drove straight home. And I'm old enough, probably no one in this audience remembers this, opening the newspaper when I got home to look at the help wanted section of the jobs posted.
I remember that. I remember the help wanted section. Yeah.
And I ended up landing a job as a bank teller. Was my first job. So I'll go back to that in a second. But what I've learned about that event was my go-to strategy was fierce independence. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to do it on my own. And it was to just block it. Like, I got into action in terms of I'm moving my life forward, but I never dealt with the emotions of the situation. And when I think about it now, that was the right strategy. It's just that type of defense mechanism, those types of defense mechanisms, they expire. And they went long past their expiration date for me. And it wasn't like I wasn't having a great life. I financially, I was great. I have a great family, but I was holding myself back in terms of being transparent in the way that people would truly feel like they knew me. And I would feel like I was allowing them to really know who I was. And the day that I left the public speaking course after telling the story, I literally had that experience of kind of the before and after. I walked into the building one way and I walked out of the building another way. And one of the things I realized, not immediately, and it was actually writing the book that I figured it out, was that I hadn't told a story. I had delivered a eulogy because I had never stopped to grieve.
Oh, wow, Michelle. That is powerful.
Yeah.
And how many of us have those I mean, you speak about this in your book, but how many of us have those money shame stories, those money secrets that we keep?
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, and you asked what my ahas were. I mean, so much of my growing up, I think we were raised at a time when you just didn't talk about money. Like that was one of the things you didn't talk about. And so financial decisions I made in my 20s that didn't turn out to be, very, they were probably what needed to happen in that moment, but weren't as helpful in my 30s and 40s. I really carried a lot of shame around that. And I think you're speaking to now that the influence of secrets and the ways that secrets can be insidious. So can you talk a little bit about secrecy and about the way that falls into our relationship with money?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I call it a secrecy bias. And I do think it's a bias because we are trained. I don't think we're born keeping the secret. I think we're trained into keeping the secret. And I'm a very big believer, if we talk about financial literacy for just a second, there's the belt and suspenders type of approach to financial literacy, right? The what you need to know and what you need to do, right? With your money, earn it, save it, invest it. But the bio, the psychology, the social aspects are a complete stepchild in the situation, right? And I don't think that, I think it's those two pieces melded together that is financial literacy, right? So the biology, the psychology, the social aspects, as well as the knowledge and the technical know-how. I think when all of that comes together and you're able to talk openly about your money in a matter-of-fact way with co-creators, right? It's just an exchange. It's a conversation, right? But the first conversation you have to have is with yourself, right? Which is what this is a one-sided book, really, right? And I hate to say it's a know yourself book or know thyself book. It's not really meant to be that, but it kind of is. But it's a one-sided conversation in that it explores where you've come from and where you are. And I think it explores self-sabotage in a different way. I bring up our visceral reaction, or what I like to call financial deja vu, which no one talks about.
Okay, I need to hear more about this financial deja vu.
Okay.
Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So financial deja vu is being in a situation that literally feels similar to another situation that you might have been in. But if you look at the facts, you're like, these are a completely different set of fact patterns, right? But it feels the same. And, I tell a story, as you've read the book, about big sweaty Carl, who
That's a great story.
He tried to renege on a signed purchase order for a car that I had ordered and agreed upon price and discount. And it was in the middle of COVID when there was a car shortage. And when the car came in and was delivered, he wanted to renege on my deal. And fortunately for me, most of that car negotiation at that point took place over the phone, which I'm so grateful for. I hope he never listens to this podcast because I was shaking like a leaf the entire time I was talking to him. My legs wouldn't stop shaking. And he was talking over me. He was threatening to not do the deal. I had already sold my other car. So, I mean, it wasn't the end of the world, but it would have totally been inconvenient. So I felt very threatened, like literally he's going to take my car away. He was talking over me. So he was being disrespectful. He was pretending that, this deal didn't exist. And, I was getting really, really nervous. I was able to control my voice and was able to have a conversation. But if he had seen me physically, there's no way he wouldn't have seen the knee shake and the hand shaking, right? So I ended up having that conversation, not really knowing where I stood at the end of the conversation. We both hung up. And I then over the weekend was like, why is my body reacting the way that it is, right? Because I'm a grown woman. I have a signed purchase order. I ordered this car, all the details. And it brought me back to being in third grade, where we had a deal at our school that first come, first serve. Kids would run, the doors would fling open and everybody would run toward the kickball field. And whoever got there first, you were playing. So I got there first with a bunch of friends, and we were in the middle of a kickball game. And this kid, third grader, Carl, came up to me and demanded that we stop playing so that he and his buddies could play on the field. And I refused, literally dug my little feet in the orange dirt and said, no, we were here first. A deal's a deal, right?
Yeah.
And he close-fisted punched me in the face.
Oh, wow. Okay. Oh, and so the car dealership brought back the lived emotional experience of big sweaty Carl.
You got it.
Yeah.
You got it. Yeah.
Oh, wow. So that, that happens. I can see the correlation. And also knowing what I know about beliefs and how much beliefs inform our reality and things like that. That all makes sense. It makes sense that that we would have these recurring patterns that show up for us that relate to some of those pain points in our early experience.
Yes. And in that particular case, because you asked me a question earlier about financial therapy.
Yeah.
I had to be my own financial therapist, right? So the first thing is, this happens to me too. And I feel like I'm pretty expert in this topic. Okay. Right. But I am human, right? We're all human. So the first thing is like recognizing, okay, how am I feeling? And my go-to question is, when have I felt like this before? And if I can identify, most of the time I can, some other time, and then I kind of like side by side, like what's the same, what's not the same, to I guess vibrationally match the visceral reaction that I'm having. And then I'm able to parse out, okay, but that was then, this is now, like you were third grade, this, all the things, but like what's triggering you about this? And part of what was triggering me was the similarity was little Carl wanted to take away my experience on the kickball field, that I was having fun. And big Carl wanted to take my car away. Right. Yeah. So that was the big, trigger for me. I think the second trigger was a deal's a deal. In both cases, it was, an agreed upon first come, first serve on the field. And in the other case, it was a purchase order agreed upon. Right. So there's some integrity issues there that I wanted to uphold that were similar. Other than that, there were no similarities. And what I had to do was fight the urge to cave in. It was so emotionally painful to speak to big sweaty Carl. That's not his name, by the way. I'm sure everybody figured that out by now. Right. It's just who I pretend little Carl grew up to be. But I had to force myself, as I was on the phone shaking like a leaf, not to cave in, not to say, you know what, it's okay. Because he wanted to charge me, thousands of dollars more. And I had to hang in there with the feeling, the urge to want to end the emotional discomfort of talking to this person by just giving up, giving in and saying, you know what, you can have the extra money. Like I need this to end. And thankfully, and that's kind of where the therapy comes in, is to be able to recognize that that's going on in the moment and to just be able to withstand the emotional discomfort. And you know what? Whether we're talking about a flashback or not, I think money comes with a lot of emotional discomfort that we need to withstand. Right?
Why do you think that is?
I think part of it is that there's a great amount of distance between our present self and our future self, right? So much of our money is tied up to what we want money to enable or enhance in our life, whether presently or in a future sense. And we're always balancing so many different competing commitments, future self, present self. my needs, your needs. I want to retire and educate my children and start a business, and I want a new car every 2 years, and, right? There's all of these different literal, numerical financial commitments. So the pain of all that, or the discomfort of that, is kind of sitting in the middle of all of those different competing commitments. Even the competing commitment of, and I talk about financial self-sabotage, I think in a little different way than it's usually talked about, which is it's usually characterized as some character flaw. Mm-hmm. No, financial self-sabotage is a very human thing, right? We all self-sabotage in some area of our life.
Can you describe what it means to, I mean, I think I understand what it means for me in my life, but when you think of self-sabotage or financial self-sabotage, what does that look like in someone's life? Does that look like making bad choices? Does that look like, what have you experienced?
Great question. So the way I would phrase it, Rachel, is that I think of financial self-sabotage, sabotage at large, as the difference between what you say you want and what you're actually doing at the base level.
Okay. That so deeply resonates for me because I know those patterns for myself. I was just telling you about this necklace. I put myself on a budget. I said, okay, I spent too much at Christmas. I need to, like more than my budget. I'm on a budget. And then I get this Instagram ad for this jewelry designer, and suddenly I'm buying a piece of jewelry that I had just made this commitment to put myself on a budget.
Yep.
So I so deeply resonate with that. And I'm really glad I bought it and I love it. But still, yeah. I mean, I think it's always like, we all break promises that we make for ourselves. It's so much easier, I think, for some of us, and especially those of us who identify as female or who are born into a woman's experience. I think it's easier for us to like prioritize the commitments we make externally. But yeah, so I want to hear more about financial self-sabotage and how we can, mostly how can we, asking for a friend, how can we break those patterns?
You're asking for me. Well, first of all, I have not cracked the code personally or professionally on not self-sabotaging. Okay. But what got me to thinking about this whole topic really is that I ranted one day against the expression, how you do one thing is how you do everything. And I thought, no, you don't. Like, it's just, that doesn't make any sense. Like I drink Diet Coke and eat pizza, certain actors slap others when they're getting the Academy Award at the height of their career. Okay. Like self-sabotage is very human. And what I learned from a gentleman who actually used to specialize in eating disorders, he discovered something that he shared with me, and it really changed the way I thought about self-sabotage. And it actually has changed the way that I speak to my clients and myself about self-sabotage, financially speaking. What he shared with me, it's a little geeky, is the theory of self-determination has 3 parts. One is competence, basically meaning you have the know-how or the skills to do something. The other 2 components, and these are, I should say too, that these are basic to all human beings, right? These 3 components. The other 2 components is the need for autonomy and the need for belonging and connection.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
What he pointed out to me is when the need for belonging and the need for autonomy are in conflict is when we self-sabotage.
Ooh, oh my gosh, that is so, I resonate with that too, that I can feel that. We have these competing desires that are in operation all the time. And depending on the different identities that we have and the different worlds that we belong in, could it also be that our desire to belong in one group competes with the desire to belong in another? Or, I mean, I think we could really,
multi-layered.
Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So for example, I don't know this, but the And by the way, I've purchased many things off of an ad that, unsuspecting little me wasn't in the market for the thing until I saw it and then had to have it. So it happens to me too. So when we think about autonomy, which is probably the easier side to talk about, is when something feels restrictive or too restrictive, we rebel, right? So the rebellion is nothing more than we're making a stand for our autonomy because we feel controlled. Now, we can often feel controlled by the sense of belonging, the need to please other people, the demands other people put on us for our time, our money, our life path, right? All of those things. And I talk about this in one story in the book about Andrew, even an invisible voice in our head that comes from a long-seated need to belong to two people who have already passed away.
Like our parents, you mean?
Yeah. In his case, it was his grandparents, but yes, who kind of taught him who to be as an investor. And what he was trying to do was live his life according to what he had learned about being a responsible, diligent, vigilant, financial human being. And not all of it was out of sync for him. But a dam burst at some point, and the pendulum swing from being, completely diligent and vigilant based on what he was taught to that feeling very controlling and restrictive to going all out where there was no control over the spending. And it's pretty interesting if you think about, like, there literally was no living human being speaking in his ear, telling him how to act with his money. He had just absorbed all of that as part of his, I know you love the word moneyhood.
I do.
As part of his moneyhood.
Yes. Right. So, so all of those, I'm thinking about this in a couple of different ways. First of all, yes, in terms of moneyhood, which I'm going to ask you about in just a second, because I love that term. That was another aha. That whole chapter was another aha for me. But I'm also thinking about the implications this has for the ways that we invest or that we save or that we spend based on the previous generations. Like, I'm wondering if you see that in a larger context with some of the trends in the way that money is managed or the way that we build wealth.
Yes, absolutely. So in some of the financial therapy studies that I've done, what's often said is when you're in a money conversation with someone else, even with yourself, it's just not you and that other person. It's their parents, it's their siblings, it's their children, it's their grandparents. Like, there are a lot of people sitting in that conversation, right? And the reason for that, I think, is because things are passed down generationally, right? Beliefs are passed down, habits are passed down, attitudes are passed down. There's something called a genogram. So you can take a family tree and trace, who were your siblings, who were your children, who were your parents, your grandparents, what did they do for a living, what was money like in their lives, in your life, what were their prevalent attitudes. When I did this, I realized in one branch of my tree that there was a very prevalent attitude that women do not go into business, to the point where certain female family members were disinherited out of very successful businesses because women don't belong in business.
Wow.
And here I come along like, oh yeah. But it was very interesting to trace this very paternal history line in my family. Other lines actually showed more, in specific, my mom's parents were very ahead of their time, right? Born in the 1919, 1920 time period, World War II veteran, grew up kind of right on the cusp of the Great Depression, so very influenced by that. But my grandmother worked when most Mothers did not work full time. She worked full time her entire life. My grandfather got home earlier than she did from the Converse sneakers factory. Yes, folks, they poured rubber soles and stitched the canvas for 40 years every day at a Converse sneakers factory.
Wow.
But he would get home first and he'd put the pot of gravy on and he'd get the washout and the clothes would be on the line. And then she would come home and they were a team. Like it was, and they also treated their money that way too. They were actually pretty open about discussing their money.
That's great.
Yeah.
That's great.
So a lot of, there's so many different influences, but family is a huge influence on us, but so is, the amount of money that we do when we don't have, what we hear other people say about it. Of course, our closest caregivers have the most impact, usually our parents, but it could also be an aunt and uncle, a cousin, anyone we're around a lot is going to have some influence. Those moneyisms that we hear, whether people are muttering them under their breath and think we can't hear them, which happens a lot, or overt things that they say that don't get explained. And we're little sponges and we take it in and we make these things mean things when we have no real academic type of understanding. And kind of going back to the visceral thing, if you think about it, we feel first before we think.
Right. Or before we have language to express how we feel. So I want to get into the moneyhood, because you brought in moneyisms and you brought in, the concept of how our family and our childhood and all these messages and beliefs shape the way that we experience our finances. And for me, this was absolutely true. I mean, I grew up with I can still hear those messages. Never marry an artist. Artists don't make money. Artists don't make money. And my dad is an artist who is, very successful, very, very talented artist. But, so growing up, I had these automatic blocks to, well, I can't really, here I was, this very artistic person in all the arts, music, theater, everything. And like I had a big brick wall, of my own beliefs. And I've worked with that a lot, and I've done a lot of healing. But I think, when I read your chapter about moneyhood, I was able to really go back in time and see the ways that those beliefs and those messages and those moneyisms from my childhood were influencing the way I think about my work and my finances today. So can you just describe, first of all, let's go back to the basics. Can you just describe what the moneyhood is? First of all, did you come up with that term? I love that term so much.
I did come up with that term. And I thought about naming the book that, and then was like, I don't know if anybody's going to get it. Yes. Where it came from, it's just a play on neighborhood.
Sure.
Right. And I really think we all grow up in a moneyhood.
Yes.
And the way I describe moneyhood is, it's the social, cultural, financial, emotional upbringing, psychological upbringing that we are exposed to growing up, right? So it can be the era, right? 70s, 80s, 90s, beyond, of what's happening in the world, right? Like, for example, right now, I think that part of what's going on is, and influencing people, unfortunately, in a negative way financially, is that there's a lot of doomsaying right now.
Right. Yeah. And the statistics and the research don't really back it up in terms of jobs and the economy.
Yeah. I think in particular, one of the biggest reasons why this is, it seems to be really leaning into that present bias that we talked about, right? Like your present, we're always weighing, like, do I want to, put this money away because I'm going to need it in the future versus, you know what, I really want that new pair of shoes now, right? That's just a natural thing as a human being, right? It just is what we do. But when you mix in an existential threat, for example, like global warming, and that the world is going to end, and people are adopting attitudes around, and I'm not judging this, this is just is. People are feeling that existential crisis and saying, why would I bother to financially prepare for a future that may never come to pass because I'm not going to live long enough because we're going to be extinct because the planet is going under. Like this is going on right now.
Right.
And, there's funny, I always love to Google, latest financial trends. And there's always so many oxymorons in them too. So one of the latest is soft saving.
Okay. Wait, what is soft saving? This is a term I have not heard before.
It's the biggest oxymoron out there. Okay. Soft saving, what they really should be saying is soft spending. Okay. Soft meaning, if you think about, it's not the amount of money allegedly that makes us happy or not. It's how we use the money. And one of the things scientifically that's backed is that buying experiences with our money makes us happier. Okay. Mm-hmm. So people are right now, there's this big trend toward entertainment, really using money to be entertained in various forms. But people are going to an extreme of not planning for their futures, and they're using their money in this way. I have no judgment about this. In fact, all of this sounds super normal. Like this is what we do. Yeah. It only becomes a problem if you do it to such an extreme that you're satisfying only your present self and you're not doing something. But it's, I think it's highly influenced by this kind of doomsday prophecy that is going on. Right. So I don't know if that really answers your question.
Yeah, that does. Have you seen this doomsday being exact? Did this start before COVID, or was this really like a post-pandemic doomsday?
I've noticed it post-pandemic.
Okay. Yeah. Me too. I think in the interest rates rising and being a part of that and the cost of living and
yes.
And one of the other things too, I serve on our city council, and housing, the prices of housing has just skyrocketed, and many people are being priced out of their homes. Mm-hmm. And millennials and younger generations are thinking, how can I even afford to buy a house with this market? I guess could you take just a moment and just kind of give us an aerial view of some of the current existing money isms and money beliefs, and what your experience of them is in your practice?
Well, before we move on, I want to add a couple things too that I think are going on.
Yeah.
I think there's a doomsday scenario too about the economy, that it often takes people a while to catch up on the real economic facts of the situation. So I think there is very much a COVID mindset going on right now, and people have not caught up the reality of the economic situation in the United States. Not to say that high interest rates and housing are a major problem for people, for sure. Mm-hmm. But I think also student loan debt is weighing heavily on people. I think people feel as if there's not as much economic opportunity here in the United States. Global warming that we talked about. So I think there's a lot of influences. What I want to say first is that I'm a big believer in controlling the controllables. Mm-hmm. Because at the end of the day, that is all we can do, right? Yeah. Is control what we think and how we act. That's it, really. Unless we're, going to be councilmen and women like you and affect change that way. So even the housing situation, like every problem has a solution. And this generation will problem solve in creative ways that Gen Xers and boomers are not thinking about. Why? Because it's a necessity, right? So I think we're going to see a lot of innovation out of all of this. But to get back to, what are some of the common things that I see? From a financial therapy, emotional standpoint, the feeling of enough, being enough and having enough are so intricately woven together. That is a huge issue. Mm-hmm. So from a financial self-sabotage perspective, that could be giving too much help or receiving too much help, right? Mm-hmm. Becoming too dependent or enabling other people who really can make it on their own. I'm dealing with a situation right now with a client who, 2 grown kids in their early 30s, highly educated, mom and dad have paid for absolutely everything, including now cars and apartments and moves across country. And this is becoming very dangerous for mom and dad, who are my clients, financially dangerous. And we've had some, what I call back of the house conversations to prepare them for the conversation that they want to step into with their children.
Okay.
And one of the things that came to light is one of the kids now wants to go back to school for a 1-year program. Mm-hmm. And the mom instantly wrote a check. And in the preparation for the conversation that she's going to have with her 2 kids, to basically say, we need to have a plan here where you're self-supporting and no longer relying on our money. Mm-hmm. I asked her about that check. She just immediately wrote it. And I just simply asked, oh, did you discuss potentially that being a loan, or that he would find a loan, or that there'd be some sort of repayment back to you? And it was such an aha moment for her that she recognized that providing for her children was so automatic. She never even stopped anymore to think about it. It's just something that she does. It's really a part of her identity. Mm-hmm. So that kind of gets into a lot of enoughness, right? Mm-hmm. Have I given my children enough? Have I been enough of a mother? So on and so forth. And then you think about the hard numerical nuts and bolts of, am I going to have enough if I keep this up? Yes, right. Yes. So it takes a little bit of unlayering there. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So how much of you work with people both as a financial wealth advisor, financial, is that what
that's my primary role in life.
Okay. So you work as a wealth manager and a financial advisor. How much of your job is helping people to navigate their own financial literacy and their own moneyhood? And how much of your job is looking at the markets and determining the best course of action for someone's investments?
Yeah. I would say about 99% of looking at the markets and creating plans and action steps are all done outside of the scope of the conversations with clients. Most conversations with clients, once there's a financial plan done and the investment strategies have been in place, kind of the joke in my industry is when you have a client meeting, it's like 90% personal and 10% financial is usually how most of these conversations are going. But specifically it kind of goes back to something we talked about earlier. In my view, what I'm most trying to understand is, what is this person trying to accomplish in their financial life? Right? How are we using this money really as a tool? Everybody talks about it that way these days, but how are we using this to enable the life that you want? And the advantage that I think a lot of people have in working with an advisor is that I can see the discrepancies, right? It's sort of like great art, that an artist sees something that you don't, and they create the art that we all enjoy. Right. And I think that's the true gift of humanity, is to see in another person or to see in a situation something that they don't, and to be able to raise it. Like this client that I was talking about, she did not see that automatic response, and it stopped her in her tracks. And she said, I don't think I realized how automatic this has all become. I didn't even stop to think. I just wrote the check.
Wow.
So I think it's being an observer, it's being an objective person, as much as any of us can be an objective, unbiased person, right? That's the whole other myth of everything. But there is, there is emotional distance. I can care for someone I'm working with deeply, but yet I still have an emotional distance of that's not my life, right? But I care deeply about these people and I can feel very emotionally connected to them. And I actually think I think in any realm of our life that it's a bonus if we can feel emotionally connected to someone who we're looking for something technical from. I think it helps us to make better decisions, right? Because
absolutely, yes.
Yeah. I mean, it's like an old friend of mine used to use an expression of delivering messages softly enough on someone else's ears so that they can hear it. Right. So it's really understanding the person enough to know how to communicate to them and to be able to raise the things that I'm saying, or at least the observations, and then checking them out, right? Because it doesn't necessarily mean what I'm seeing is right.
Yeah.
But I think what I'm really talking about is no one can manage someone else's behavior, right? That agency is our own.
Right.
However, we can hold space and we can facilitate that behavior. Some of that is technical know-how, right? Of this choice that you're making, let me round out the other half of what's missing here, right? Because there are technical things that you haven't considered. Or there are other strategies that would work better, right? Whether it's investing or taxes or retirement plans or a million other different things. So some of it is just gaps in knowledge that can be very instrumental to people. And then others recognizing patterns, what I usually do with clients, I used to ask the question, what's your first memory of money growing up?
I love that. I love that question. Yeah.
Okay. Well, if you like that one, well, what is your first memory of money growing up?
My first memory of money growing up, actually, it's so funny. Just now, it was flooded in my mind. My dad's an artist, and he was in grad school when my parents were had me, and this is funny, but my grandparents lived in a funeral home. They owned a funeral home. My grandpa was a funeral director. And we had to move in with my grandparents and live in the basement of the funeral home for a little while. And so my first memory of money was the love, like feeling the love of, I get to be with all of these amazing elders and who I loved so much, but also my dad's struggle to really create a life for his new family. So my first experience of money was the hardship of it, and also this extreme generosity that was given to me by my great grandma Rachel and by my dad's parents. So that's my and like I said, I was really young, but that memory just flooded into my mind of being in the basement of that funeral home.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's an amazing memory. Yeah, I mean, I could see, without putting words in your mouth, you said a little bit, but I can see how that connection and belonging could be a very strong thread around your money, right?
Yes.
Okay. So now that we've asked that question, what I actually prefer to ask people now is, what is your first memory of talking about money?
That's good. That's a good one too. Yeah. My first memory of talking about money was all around tithing, when we had these little money boxes that you would put your pennies in every Lent. I was raised Catholic. So every Lent, you give, 10% of whatever you have, or all you have sometimes, to the poor. Yeah.
Wow.
It wasn't here's how you balance a checkbook. It wasn't here's how you invest. It was give all your money away.
Two very strong messages about taking care of people.
Totally. Exactly.
Wow. Yeah. That's so interesting.
Yeah. So and that was the the foundation for my moneyhood, as you say.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then once you have those questions from your clients, what do you do with that, or how do you help them navigate, or what comes next in the process?
Well, then part of my process is what I'm trying to do is learn as much about the human being as about their finances.
Mm-hmm.
That's my goal,
mm-hmm.
is to understand both of those things equally well. Once that has started, right, and it's a deep dive into who are you as a human being around your money, mm-hmm. and just who are you as a human being? What do you value? All of those types of things. Where are you going? What is it that you want to accomplish? Then it becomes a bit more formal. It's sort of like I step away. Now I'm analyzing, right? So I'm taking all of the financial pieces, the emotional components that they have told me might be grist for the mill of some of the recommendations that it will inform me in some of the recommendations that I will make for this person, because I know a little bit more about their history. And then there's all the technical aspects. So usually it's a formal financial plan. Most of the time it's centered around education and retirement. Those are usually the big two, although there's other goals that people have. I then sidebar and have a second biographical discussion with people where we take a really deep dive into their attitudes around risk, life risk and financial risk. And we're also talking about something called money scripts, which I talk about in the book, So those are unconscious beliefs that we hold around money. And there are four main scripts: vigilance, which we talked a little bit about, vigilance, money status, money focus, money avoidance. So someone who's money avoidant, their subconscious, unaware belief is money is bad. Money focus is more money will fix all my problems. Mm-hmm. Money status is my net worth is my self-worth. And money vigilance is money is private. And out of those four, I am convinced, not that the other three are not problematic, I'm convinced breaking the belief that money is private is probably the hardest one to break and the most powerful one to break. Mm-hmm. Because I really do think being able to communicate with yourself first and foremost. So I'm not sure I closed the loop on this part of the conversation when I said this is a one-sided conversation kind of book.
Right.
This book is basically, it's meant to help the person to be able to step into financial conversations with themselves and others very powerfully. Even if the other person that you're talking to has never done any of this work, you will be very powerful because you've done a little trip down memory lane. You know where some of your stuff has come from. You've raised your consciousness. You've thought about, how do I actually talk to myself about money? And you start to get more clear on what is it that you want. And I think similar to me, although probably a very different variety, I think a lot of people have a part of their money self that they need to grieve, right? Mm-hmm. Something that happened to them or a mistake that they made that they've never forgiven themselves for. Even changing a belief could be a form of grief when you realize that you're holding a belief that's been so limiting, right? I can make you cry.
Right.
I can make you grieve.
I know. I'm feeling that right now. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that had to have happened to you, Rachel, right? Of artists don't make any money, right?
It did. And as I was reading your book, I mean, I've always said, this happened. My dad's path is that he was an art teacher and then he retired and became an art. And so I've always said, when I retire, I'm going to be an artist. When I retire, I'm going to be an artist. And as I was reading this, I started to really open up my own perspective for, first of all, the ways that I'm an artist in everything that I do in my everyday work. But also I started to really even question. I mean, I started to really unpack that belief system. So it really was I think just having the awareness, being able to go into those beliefs through reading your book and have those beliefs just come almost like as movies playing in my mind, gave me an opportunity um, to have more compassion for myself, to almost like laugh at some of the cute ways in which I heard those messages and the ages I was where I was hearing those messages, and and it it was really game changing. And there are other messages that, like, when I married my wife, I had these beliefs of I'm not good with money, which is why I think the title of your book is so funny, because I grew up with like money burns a hole in your pocket and da 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 da, and you better marry someone rich. And when I married her, she said, "You're great with money. I don't spend in excess of what I bring in. I have savings. I've been successful." And she's like, "Where do you get this idea that you're bad with money?" And and so I wasn't able to really fully integrate that new belief or that new truth that was being reflected to me in my lived experience until I read this book and started to get in touch with the ways in which all of those old moneyisms are still hanging out there, working in my subconscious mind.
Yes.
So that was huge.
And you talked out loud about it to another human being.
Exactly. Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm even noticing, doing it here with you right now in this moment, there's even more of a letting go and so you're right. So I can actually feel in real time, Michelle, this is amazing. I can actually feel in real time the impact or the influence of breaking that secrecy bias. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. I can actually feel more power, because you use the word power.
Yeah.
And that was another chapter in or section in your book that I really related to. I can actually feel more power returning as I say, you know what, Michelle, I'm actually really good with money.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it. Well, for any audience members that don't know this, you and I have known each other for a long time.
We have. Yes, we have.
And we've talked about one of my favorite words, abracadabra.
Yes.
Which I used to think was a made up gibberish word that musicians uttered when they, took the rabbit out of the hat, and was delighted to learn that it's an Arabic word that means what I speak is what I create. And if you think about, your the moneyism, the expression that you were growing up of artists don't make any money, right? Starving artist concept. That spoken word, right? It, for a time, it created that environment for you.
Correct. Right.
Right.
Yes.
And I think we have to remember, kind of that dual, the dichotomy of, the powerful magic that happens with the words that we are hearing and receiving, right?
Yes.
And also the power of what we're saying to ourselves, the power of the word in our head, as well as the spoken word of what we are saying. And even just being able to say, the opposite or what have you about, artists do very well in this life.
Yes.
Right. Or however you want to phrase that, right. Is powerful. It's not just breaking a belief. It's literally, we do create our reality by the words that we use, right? That is what creates our reality.
I love that. I love this so much. And I'm hoping that this is the first of other conversations. I want to have you back on the podcast. This has been
thank you.
This
I would love
such
to.
a rich, no pun, it's like literally rich, enriching, abundant conversation. And Michelle, you are you're full of wisdom, knowledge, heart, and smart. So thank you so much for sharing. I always love to leave everybody with a call to action. I call it the cosmic call to action. So do you have any, and this is a cosmic call to action is just a way to take the information that we discussed and to bring it home in an embodied way and in your lived day-to-day experience. So do you have any call to action that you would like to give for our listeners?
The first thing that comes to mind actually is to answer the question, what is the first money conversation you ever had out loud with another human being? To answer that question yourself and then to talk about it out loud with another person.
I love that. I love that. And I'm just going to add, go and get Michelle's book.
And go get my book.
where can people find you? And your book is available anywhere books are sold, correct? Amazon?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble, yes. Okay, great. And I do have a sample of my first chapter on my website, free download, which is at michelleab.com. So if anybody would like to get a sample of that, happy to. And I am starting a Substack newsletter.
Fantastic.
So people can go find me there. Yeah, it's all topic adjacent to Be Good with Money.
Yeah, excellent. You're such a great writer. I can't wait to read your Substack. I want to be one. Yeah. Well, Michelle, thank you so much for being on the show. And thank you for sharing your messages with the world.